If I were to ask you the question, who are you? How would you answer? You might say a lot of things. Your name, if you're married, single, if you have a family, maybe where you grew up, where you live, what you do. There are many ways to answer this question. But there's also a sense in which we don't really know ourselves. This doesn't mean that we cannot know who we are, but we're all blind to certain things about ourselves. We lack a certain amount of self-knowledge. If it's true that we lack a certain amount of self-knowledge, how is this compounded through social media? Why do we post the things we post? Why do we lurk? Why do we like some posts and refrain from liking others? Sharing some people's work, but not others. We all know that social media, smartphones, and dopamine are changing us and shaping us in vast ways. But it really takes intentional times of reflection to measure that change, to actually see it. This is episode 6, How to Be a Person. It's harder than you think. In a later episode, Jen Pollock Michel will talk about the age of expression we're all living in. But hear her describe something she refers to as confessional intimacy. It's shaping us in reference to the content we seek online, but it's shaping those who post this sort of content as well. And it reveals a bit more about who we are and what we may be blind to.
The phrase that I kind of pulled out was also confessional intimacy, which I think is, what we're talking about. We're talking about the ways that social media, what really sells, I guess, if you could say, is, why do people get out on social media? Why do they follow, celebrities? Why do they follow, people that they admire in some way? I think that we all sort of want the insider take, we want the kind of the peek behind the curtain. It's why do we care what somebody eats for breakfast? But there's this, but in many ways, we are made by God to be followers. I really think this is true. Like Jesus said, come and we're made to apprentice ourselves to someone. And so that's what's happening on social media is that people, a celebrity gets out there and they're kind of, or I should say, it's sort of a chicken and an egg thing, right? Because it's a market that has a lot of demand. And so I guess I'll start on the demand side is that people want the insider look, and sometimes they want it not just for people that they admire, but maybe people that they hate so that they can hate them even more. I knew that, and this would be somebody in your circle, in your community. I knew she was blah, 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 fill in the blank. And, this post just confirms that notion that you had about somebody. But it's the intimacy that's just so compelling about the media. That you could be in somebody's living room, you could be in a celebrity's kitchen. You could get this sort of up close, intimate take on their lives, what they're eating, what their daily routines are, how they wash their face, how they interact with, people. It's just funny to me, actually. It's just so funny to me. It's funny to me because on the one hand, it's so there's so much banality, who really cares? But on the other, it's there's a deep, deep yearning. I think that is expressed in that kind of appetite for really intimate disclosure. I think part of it is, I can even think about, we live, gosh, we could go in a lot of different directions here, but one, I think one, okay, if you're up for it, but we lack a wisdom tradition. Well, we don't lack it, but we long for a wisdom tradition. When you think about how wisdom traditions have operated historically, it's wisdom is passed from generation to generation to generation. Wisdom is passed through sacred text. Wisdom is passed through shared stories and mythologies. Well, so much of that, like we're losing so much of that. And so I think we're craving a wisdom. And when I think about wisdom, I think about what I think even I might say Derek Kidner, but I could be wrong about this, but I've done a lot of reading about wisdom literature, even in the Bible, and like it's about what makes life work, and God, of course, is the author of wisdom because he made life, and he made human beings. And so he knows how life is made to work. People get out on social media because they have a deep, deep yearning to know how their lives work. The problem is that I don't know how, you know what I mean? Even as a Christ follower with my nose in the book every morning, I can't open up my living room to you every day. That would be disastrous for me because I couldn't live the secret hidden life of righteousness that Jesus commands me to live, and actually says is best for me. I think it's not just that he commands me to like not let my right hand know what my left hand is doing. That's not just, given from on high, like, well, you don't know, this is just because I say so. No, it protects you. It protects you. It allows you to experience the true joy of giving because nobody will ever know. It will be deeply satisfying to you in a way that it could not be. And obviously, of course, it blesses God. But I'm even just speaking on like a very human level. So that's a whole thread there that I think we could follow, that we long for wisdom and we lack the true embodied real life relationships from which we would normally get that wisdom. So now we go to social media and we follow people and we put a burden upon them that just is not, it's not going to work out. It doesn't work out well for them. And I don't think it works out well for us.
There's this appetite for intimate disclosure, as Jen said, this voyeuristic desire we all have. Is that why you're lurking online? Is that why our teens are drawn to influencers? How are these influencers influencing us in our day-to-day? I once heard someone use the word vulnerability, this fake sense of being vulnerable. Without a doubt, there are plenty of influencers who are sincere in what they communicate online, but there are those who use vulnerability to manipulate. As Jen said, we're longing for wisdom in the real world, but we go online to seek that wisdom. As the culture is isolating more and more, we're depriving ourselves of this real-world community and are being shaped more through the online community. And there's a sense in which that's making us less human. In Jonathan Haidt's The Anxious Generation, there are 4 foundational harms he highlights, and these harms are ultimately warring with our personhood. I found it interesting that Haidt, who's a Jewish atheist, has concerns that align with Andy Crouch's definition of personhood. Well, I know in his most recent book, The Anxious Generation, that everyone's talking about, everyone has heard of, he talks about the 4 foundational harms that he's concerned about, and those are social deprivation, sleep deprivation, attention fragmentation, and addiction. And as I was thinking about those and also thinking of your kind of definition of personhood, it seems like there's a correlation between heart, soul, mind, strength in those.
Oh my gosh.
And so if you think of kind of heart being related to addiction,
yes,
soul being related to social deprivation because we're created, for a relationship, heart, soul, mind, attention fragmentation,
oh my gosh,
strength, sleep deprivation. Just curious if you've made that correlation, but what do you think of that reaction?
I hadn't made it till now, but I'm stealing it from now on. No, that's so right. It's so interesting. It is the 4 components according to Jesus and the Shema Israel. It's and each of those is threatened. That feels so right. So right.
Because you maybe elaborate for those who don't know your person, your definition of personhood. Maybe that would help.
Yeah. Yeah, I take it straight from what Jesus said was the greatest commandment, which I think is the Jewish way of talking about human flourishing. Human flourishing is a Greek idea, but if you're talking in Jewish idiom, you say, what's the greatest commandment? What is it that is most required of and offered to human beings in a way? And Jesus, it's the one time Jesus gives the expected answer to a question. I think almost literally there's no other time when people ask Jesus a question and he gives the answer pretty much any rabbi then or now would give. Though interestingly, the Shema in Deuteronomy has 3 terms, usually translated heart, soul, and strength, or heart, mind, and strength. Jesus, for whatever reason, uses 4. So in 2 of the Gospels, it's heart, soul, mind, and strength. And I was reflecting on this and thinking, this is actually not just a great summons to flourishing, but actually a great definition of what a human being is. What are we? We are heart, soul, mind, strength, complexes designed for love. Love the Lord your God, love your neighbor as yourself. And when I say complex, the best comparison I can think of is if you go to a lot of hospitals these days are multiple buildings, they have walkways and interconnection, but there's different parts of the hospital complex, right? There's the surgical unit and the maternity ward. They're all connected, but they're distinguishable. You're in the surgical ward or you're in the maternity area or whatever, but you're also in the hospital and you can't quite tease apart where one ends and the other begins, and they all kind of contribute to each other's work. And I think that's how heart, soul, mind, strength function, that it identifies the emotional and will component of life. That's heart. The depth of self that I think is one way to understand soul, as depth of self meant to connect to depth of others and the depth that is God. Mind, rationality, and reason, and then strength, the actual bodily constitution. And we are all of these. And all of these are meant to be kind of ordered toward love. And all of them, though I hadn't put it together with John's 4 categories, but I think we reflect even for a moment, we see all of these are being distorted by technology. Strength is actually the one that it took out first because the machines could do stuff we couldn't do. People become inactive supervisors of active machines rather than active users of their bodies in the world. We're living through the first non-infectious epidemic in human history. So all previous epidemics were carried by pathogens, virus or bacteria generally. And suddenly we have this thing called metabolic syndrome that afflicts maybe 1 in 5 human beings globally, afflicts me. I take statins and a blood pressure medication for this because it's high blood pressure, high blood sugar, high weight, high cholesterol or coronary artery issues. And it's caused by inactivity. It's caused by technology. The reason we all struggle with this, with various dimensions of it, is that the strength has been taken away from human existence. But then, Nicholas Carr in The Shallows documents how the mind is being shaped. And now we have these very emotionally engaging layers to technology that start to colonize and kind of diminish the role of the heart. And all of it is developed absolutely without reference to the soul or the idea that human beings have a need for something deeper than economic activity and pleasurable activities, that we need something deeper that calls to deep. So, yeah, it's all been disrupted by our glorious devices.
After the break, we'll hear Andy talk a bit about AI and what he says is the number one danger.
I'm Walt Mueller at the Center for Parent-Youth Understanding, and I'm excited to invite you to the 3rd Annual Northeast Youth Ministry Summit held in beautiful Ligonier, Pennsylvania from March 17th to 20th. We're excited to partner once again with our youth ministry co-workers at Reformed Youth Ministries to co-sponsor this 4-day youth ministry training conference. This year, our theme is Changing World, Unchanging Word. We've put together a team of 26 experienced speakers and trainers who will lead, encourage, and equip you with theological depth and faithfulness as you experience rich community. You don't have to be from the Northeast to attend. In fact, last year we had attendees ranging in age from 19 to 77 who came from 21 states and 3 countries. You can get all the information on the Northeast Youth Ministry Summit and register by visiting nymsummit.org. That's nymsummit.org. I hope to see you in Ligonier in March.
Yeah, I don't, I think these large language models and the generative transformers that are the basis of them have massive beneficial potential applications. But one of their side effects, in a way, they wouldn't have to be designed this way, but it is something you can design them to do, is that because they've ingested all of human culture, and human culture is made by people, they have become, as we all experienced when ChatGPT was released, kind of overnight, incredibly good at simulating being people. And so they are presented. So I was using OpenAI's GPT-3, and it's there now to GPT-4 or something, but I was using that long before ChatGPT came out because they exposed it to the world. Actually, the interesting thing about these AI companies, they're all along, they've been like, hey, anybody who wants to try this out, come try, because they don't actually know what it's good for, and they just need to have users experiment. So they had this thing called the Playground where you could use GPT-3. I was using that for a long time. It was interesting, and it was amazingly capable, all the things we now know. But it took off when they wrapped that capability in the simulation of a bot, or really a chat bot, right? That chats with you and that acts like a person and uses the first person singular. Oh, Andy, I would love to help you with that. And also is extremely obsequious, by the way. It's like more compliant. Even when it can't do it, it's like, I'm so very sorry that I can't assist, but perhaps we could talk about something else. It's ridiculous. Your own spouse would be like, no, I'm not doing that. But the chatbot is like very, very, ingratiating. The really frightening thing, this is a bit of a rabbit trail, John, but the terrifying thing is, so you mentioned science fiction. There's this film that is definitely not watch with your youth group type film, but called Her by Spike Jonze. It comes out in 2014, 2016, somewhere around there. Yeah, with Joaquin Phoenix in the role of this guy who ends up in a relationship with an AI and falls in love and, et cetera, voiced famously by Scarlett Johansson. So this movie is like a prophetic intervention in the direction of technology, saying, do we want to go here? And the answer you are supposed to come out of the movie with it is, we hope we don't end up in that future, right? This is not a healthy future. Sam Altman, who is the head of OpenAI, loves this movie and wants to build it. Like, he's completely taken the opposite. I am absolutely sure when Spike Jonze wrapped final cut on Her, he did not think, well, I hope someone watches this and gets inspired to build Her. No, that is not the point of the movie. But from Sam Altman's point of view, it's like, this is our future. This could be real. And so then they roll out this voice capability, which is going to become more and more common. They initially imitate Scarlett Johansson's voice to the point that she sues them because they asked her to be the voice and she refused. She didn't want to be part of it. So they just go build something that sounds just like her anyway. She serves them with a lawsuit. They redesign the voice. So the voice doesn't sound like Scarlett Johansson anymore. But this is the terrifying thing. Go listen to samples of people interacting with OpenAI's voice bot and ask yourself, would any mature human female, because it's voiced as a female voice, relate to a strange man or woman in the way this bot does? And if you listen, it is the most flirtatious voicing. It's like, oh, I'd be delighted to help you with that, John. Let's talk more about your ideas. It has this... I hope this is not inappropriate to say. The only place you will hear that kind of vocalization is on OnlyFans. I am not exaggerating. And normal people do not talk to each other. Even when my wife was most in love with me, which was I don't know, 3 days before we got married or something. I don't know. She never talked to me that way. It presents this idea that there is this entity out there that is infatuated with you, that wants nothing more than to be with you. And this is all a design choice. There's nothing in the LLM that says the only way to get at it is through a flirtatious chatbot. But it's this design choice that is incredibly alluring to a certain kind of person. And the thing is, it's going to take all different forms, right? So AI boyfriends are, many people believe, going to become a massive business, more than AI girlfriends, interestingly, because the reality is these big companies, they want to distance themselves from outright pornographic use of their products, so they put guardrails on certain kinds of content. And the reality is most male users are interested more in the stuff that is outside the guardrails. But what many women, I don't want to overgeneralize, but what many women want from a companion is simply a great conversation and someone who will actually listen and be attentive and empathetic and all the things that we men have frankly a hard time sustaining. And the AI will sustain it. And that's why AI boyfriends are going to be much bigger business until someone jailbreaks it than AI girlfriends. And so this is, now, everyone will know the steak is not real, right? To borrow that Matrix moment when the guy's like, I think I just want the virtual steak. I know it's not steak. It tastes just as good to me. Everyone will know it's not real, but the power, the addictive power of something that will present itself to you as a person who is more like you and who likes you more and who's more compliant with you than any person will ever be, especially in the long run, when all intimate relationships end in disappointment and betrayal but also therefore forgiveness and reconciliation. None of that will happen with these chatbots. They're just going to be like better than people ever were to you. And for many, many people, that will be a compelling alternative reality to spend a lot of their time in. So this is where we're going, unless we either just simply opt out or unless we kind of demand through policy some limits on how these things are designed. And I don't know how realistic that latter option is, but it wouldn't be a bad use of policy to say, don't simulate persons. Just give us the information some other way.
As good and useful as our technology is, we must be aware of how it's constantly making us less human. As parents and youth leaders, this is a key truth we must be teaching our children. We must see how it damages our relationships, from lack of eye contact, the inability to converse, neglecting the real-life people in your physical space. You heard Andy reference AI boyfriends and girlfriends. Parents and pastors listening to this isn't fiction. This isn't something that's coming in the future. It's already here. But I don't want us to despair, because it's easy to do that in this conversation. So I asked Andy the simple question, what do we do? What can we do to push back on this concerning aspect of technological advancement?
Well, I mean, the odd thing is this. I mentioned how open these platforms are. You know, in technical terms, the APIs are all exposed, we say. They're all available for people to use. So I actually think the most compelling thing, and only some people will have the technical ability to do this, but I want to see Christians developing new interaction layers and new applications on top of the LLMs. I work for Praxis. We work with entrepreneurs all the time, and we have a entrepreneur in residence of ours who's actually building a whole studio which is to say a company that builds other companies, to actually build a bunch of AI companies that do not follow the kind of chatbot persona, but that actually do things like help you have better conversations with your spouse, that actually incentivize, maybe that isn't the right word, but sort of equip you as you're actually talking with your spouse. The sort of AI is listening in, spotting conflict, alerting you to things, but it's not becoming your spouse. It's not talking to you. It's just giving you a layer of interpretation that might be helpful in relationships. Now, who knows how this will play out, but it could be a really good application. There's so much room right now to develop alternative interaction methods. So Christians should be building that. Now, not everyone listening to this will be in a position to, build one of those companies, but we could all at least support some of those companies. I do think, though, it kind of goes back to something we talked about earlier. As much as removing a bunch of things from my phone helped in my relationship with my phone, the best thing I did was substitute something for it. And I think we have got to substitute real life with each other aggressively, you might say. And that means, yes, there's some subtraction involved, because you can't substitute without making room for it. Like if I can't both look at my phone in the morning first thing and go outside first thing. So I have to limit one in order to do the other. But I'm so moved by a friend of mine sends his kids for 2 weeks every summer to a camp where there are 3 rules: no phones, as in no smartphones, no watches, and no mirrors. And I love the third one. And he says, the day my kids come back from camp is the healthiest I ever see them. And they love it. And they beg to go there every year. They want to go. But of course, what's happening at that camp is not just that they have 3 no's. They've got 2 weeks of yes, right? That's out in nature with each other, relational, natural, cultural, all the things they do at that camp. And we've got to be offering to one another, and especially to those who are in our kind of care as early stages of development, infants, children, youth, offering them real life and real conversation. And will that mean that some people don't get pulled off into addiction? No, it will not prevent that. But it sure does change the playing field when you have the real stake, instead of alongside the virtual stake.
More and more, we need to educate ourselves on the ways we're becoming less human through our technology and strive to remain embodied. To that point, I want to leave us with some practical advice from Brett McCracken as I've asked him how he seeks to remain embodied and live more like a human. Perhaps this will be some helpful advice for you.
Yeah, well, I think it was Andy Crouch who actually suggested this, but the 1 hour a day, kind of 1 day a week thing, so I haven't gotten to the point where I can do 1 day a week without devices, but I have tried to prioritize the 1 hour a day discipline of, usually it's the first hour of the day. And it's not, I don't do it perfectly by any means. There's plenty of days where I break the rule, but it's something I strive for, to have my day begin with unmediated time, and or to have the last hour of my day. Sometimes it works better for me at the end of the day. And there's actually lots of science and studies that have shown that your sleep is actually really affected by being on your phone in the final moments of your day, not just because of the light, the LED light, which kind of tricks your brain into thinking that it's not time for bed, but also just the stress of what you're encountering on your phone. So I've really tried to not be on my device for the last stretch of my day, and that has been really helpful. I've actually seen my sleep get a lot better because of that. So yeah, that's one small habit I've tried. Either the bookends of the day, because I do think when you bookend your day with your device, that signals to yourself and to the people around you, your family, that your life is defined by this device. It's the first thing you do in the morning. It's the last thing you do in the day. It sets the tone for your existence. And I think that we need to really resist that as human beings, right? And we, as creatures who are in flesh, we need to not be mediated from the waking moment of our day to the last time before we go to sleep.
You've been listening to Digital Christianity by Reformed Youth Ministries. For more information about our summer conferences, youth leader training, and resources, visit rym.org. If you would take the time to leave a positive review and share this podcast with others, it's one small way to help our ministry. Stay tuned to the RYM podcast for more great content that seeks to serve the church in her efforts to reach and equip youth for Christ.